And she said, "You're going to go back and you're going to teach people this." And it was 6 words that I was given. "The currency of eternity is love." And as I heard that, I understood it. Like, what do we value here? What is a currency? It's just a means of exchange. It's something that we give value because it's like a public contract that it has value. You have $100 bill, and the only reason it has value is because we agree that with each other that it has value, so we can exchange it for whatever costs $100. Well, to God, I understand that there's nothing that we have that has value, right? Other than love. And as God values our love for one another.
I'm here today with Kaylee Sweeney. Kaylee stopped breathing following a medical procedure. As medical staff attempted to save her life, she had a life transforming near death experience. Kaylee conceded herself to death and eternal damnation for being transgender. Instead, she experienced a beautiful vision of the afterlife. Kaylee, I am so pleased to have you with me here today and to get to spend this time with you. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and your introduction gives a lot of my background and actually kind of encapsulated. And it's why I've experienced so much change following my near death experience.
Well, I'm excited to learn more about it and
Okay.
yeah, how this has changed your life. So tell me, tell me about your near-death experience. What happened?
Okay. Well, I'll give a few minutes of like where I was before because
Sure.
I think, well, I have my theory about near death experience, and I don't know right or wrong, but I tend to think that people experience what they need to experience in order to be able to transition from this life into the next, to be able to perhaps relax into it if that's what's needed for them. So I think that what leads up to their near death experience, it certainly was for mine, had an influence of what my experience was during my NDE. And you alluded to it. I was born male. And so I've done these things before, these talks, and I've had all kinds of comments of that didn't make me particularly feel good. But that's what you open yourself up to when you're public about this. But what I will say is that from my very earliest age, I felt like I was in the wrong gender. From my earliest memories were from kindergarten. In that regard, is and it was the same through middle school and high school and college, and it never changed. And I had a couple of times when I talked about it, either to alluding to it kind of with family, and had a less than positive reaction, or I think other kids picked up on, especially boys. I got beat up a couple times in bathrooms and in kindergarten. And then in fourth grade, and even in high school, I got some ribbing for it. So I tried to really fit in as much as I could because I thought I can't be that way. This was the 1980s when I was saying it, 70s and 80s, because it was the early 80s when I was in middle school and then high school, and I was in a fairly small city, and people just didn't know what that was, and I had no exposure to anyone who was transgender at all. I mean, anything LGBT, really. Um, so it was things that I felt, but I felt like it was wrong given the kind of reactions that I had to it. So I wrestled in high school, for instance. and I was miserable while I was doing it. What I did like was doing theater makeup. You know, when I was saying fifth, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, middle school, I began trying wearing my mom's clothes if they were away and putting on makeup, that kind of thing. And it made me feel really I felt really good. It's like this is who I want to be. Um, I came from a modestly religious family. I wouldn't call them fundamentalists, anything approaching that, but we did go to church every Sunday. And so I remember even praying when I was in elementary school, praying that God would make me a girl, but that never happened. Never had an answer to those prayers per se until well, I guess I had to wait on that. And then this is and what this has turned out to be is probably better than what I could have asked for in many respects. Um, I tried to ignore my feelings and bury them. I tried to conform. I got married and had a kid. I had a successful business career as a real estate broker. You hear that you do that, and so I had an assistant and worked with 40, 50 different agents in a couple offices, but also wanted to become as good a person as I could, whatever the hell that means. Because I felt guilty for the feelings that I had inside. And so I studied for the ministry while I was, raising a family, while I was a broker of a real estate office. It's like I was killing myself, really, um, by just working so hard and so many hours, trying to fit in, trying to be what I thought other people's expectations were of me. Um, well, eventually I left real estate and went into ministry. I took a church. And when I moved away from where I had the real estate office, it was my family's business. So I moved to another part of the state and took the church. Um, that's when things really, really got hard for me. Um, the when I was in my business, it was like something every 15 minutes. I mean, I think our office did a couple thousand transactions a year. And I was constantly being bombarded with other people's problems with home inspections and financing and, buyers and sellers not getting along. So they turn to their broker to try to, you know, help me fix this. um, and so there was never really any time for me to self reflect about gender. So I was successful, so to speak, at purging because I had a collection of clothes and stuff that I threw away, and that's a fairly common thing among people with gender dysphoria. And I went into ministry, and I remember when I was being ordained, the bishop is anointing my hands with oil and praying over them. And my prayer at that time was that God take these feelings away from me. You know, now finally, with me dedicating my life, myself, my body to your service, please take this away. And you know, where before I had prayed to become a girl when I was a kid, and that was unanswered. This one too. Um, I it didn't happen. I still struggled just as much, and when I finally went into full time ministry, I didn't have that constant bombardment of busyness. I stayed busy, but nothing like what it was before. And so in writing sermons and praying for parishioners, and doing pastoral care, the kind of things that you do as a pastor, excuse me, there's a lot of time for self-reflection. It's part of the job. And I thought that my inside was dirty and sinful. And I mean, in many respects, that is the message of a lot of the Bible, that, yeah, we are dirty, filthy creatures. But I thought I'm worse than anybody because I have these feelings about my identity and I can't get rid of them. I can't pray it away. And they just got worse. And there were some things that happened in the community that just exacerbated my feelings of incongruence, and also made me feel like a hypocrite. There was a young high school student, um, and that was transgender, that came out their sophomore year in high school, and was really petitioning the school board to be able to use the restroom of their self-perceived gender. Um, and there was an uproar in the county about that. And I remember having meetings with pastors, and the pastors saying, we have a gender confused student, and we need to get together and say something about that. And I was in a conservative church. I had a parishioner come up to me and say, you need to go to that school board meeting and say something about that, speak up about that. Ministers of the community need to get together and speak up about that. And here I am, feeling the way I feel, knowing who I am. Well, I mean, there's no way that I could speak to that. And I felt like such a hypocrite. In the theology and the canons of my church, really, an identity of someone who is transgender is, the word that would is used word is perversion. I would be a perversion. And so that was my self-reflection. And that led to self-hatred. Um, and some things happen within the church and in my family, that where I gave advice to other people to seek therapy. And so I thought to myself, if anybody needs therapy, it's me. Because I had this persona of where everything seemed to be fine. I preached every Sunday and showed up to all my Bible studies and different meetings. I had helped start a homeless shelter. Was singing in the bands. I got myself really active. I tried to bury myself in activity, like when I was a real estate broker, and it didn't work. It didn't take the feelings away. And by now it was just getting stronger and stronger and stronger. My desire, I guess, because I was aging and I knew my life was going to be shorter, and I was wishing more and more that I could really live to be the person who I was. And I got to a certain point to where I thought I'm better off killing myself. Let me restate that. I thought, and this is depression speaking, and not rationality, I thought that it'd be my family would be better off with me killing myself instead of transitioning to female. And I thought those are my two binary choices, because I can't keep going as I'm going, because it makes me a hypocrite. And my depression is so great that the pain that I felt crying and wailing when I'm alone, self-loathing, um, looking in the mirror and telling myself how much I hated myself, telling myself that I'm a coward for not killing myself, telling myself that my family would be better if I were dead. They would be happier. That's where I was. I did have a suicide. I did attempt suicide. Um, and you know, that's its own story, but that's for sake of time, I'll just leave that out and say it wasn't successful. Like that's what a terrible word to use for suicide. So well, it wasn't successful. Well, it didn't the attempt didn't end in my it didn't end in my death, and it didn't lead to a hospitalization either because it was it was very private. But what I did do was seek therapy. Um, After a few meetings with my therapist, all I talked about was, you know, family stuff and other things that I was feeling. I think I was trying to justify that I'm a good person to my therapist. I talked about my familial relationships, about everything unrelated to my being transgender. The thing that really um, was eating at me and um, was made me feel so bad about myself that I would actually want to die. And after I had talked to her about everything else and I shared everything else, I was driving to my appointment and I thought, I don't have anything else to talk to her about. I mean, this is the one issue that if I took care of it, everything else would be pretty good. And that's what's driving my sense of self-loathing. Um, so I arrived at the meeting. I said, I'm not going to come out to her. I'm not going to come out. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. I had never ever told anybody about how I felt, and I told her. I said I always want to. I've always felt like I was a woman. I since my very youngest years, I wanted to be a girl. I prayed to be a girl. I felt like I should be that. And what I am now just feels wrong. And she was asked, she said, like, how does that make you feel? And I feel like a ton of bricks was lifted off my chest. It's like I had so much pressure built up inside that I thought I was going to explode. And here I had begun to release that pressure. Thing of it is that it's a lot built up, a lot of pressure built up inside myself. Once I had begun to let some of it out, I couldn't stop. I came out to my mother soon after that. I came out to another pastor friend um, who had a gay son, and I thought would be affirming and understanding because I had heard things that he had told to other people regarding someone being gay or trans, what his thoughts were on that, and really what his theology, how he thought God would think about it. And so I thought he would be receptive to me, and he loved me, and he loved me, and he God loved me. So that was a lot. Eventually, I went and found a therapist who was a specialist in people with gender dysphoria, and I went to see her for several years. I had my wife went and had an appointment with her as well. She and I eventually even got marriage counseling with another therapist who specialized in family counseling. Um, but I think one of the things that my therapist, that was the gender specialist, was telling her is that I would always feel this way and that it wouldn't go away. And she said, people deal with it in different ways. Some people dress a little bit and that's enough, or they get rid of it. Some people get on hormones and they feel a little bit better. And that's what I did as I got on female hormones. My body started to change, but the way I felt is, I thought of it as a trial. I'm going to see how I feel about this. But as my body started changing, as my skin got softer, as all these other changes that occur that are remarkable. Um, I felt more like myself. And I experienced my mind changing. I experienced the way some tactile things felt different to me then. It was really was a fascinating kind of change. Um, and so I decided it was really after my suicide attempt that I had decided that I wanted to live and I would do what I needed to do in order to be able to live my best life. And so these some of these things followed after that. And I got to know people who were transgender. I sought them out on Facebook and other places, and I built myself a support group. I found friends. I found another friend that was a pastor. Actually, it was my therapist that I was seeing that had once been a therapist for this other pastor. She got permission for me to talk to her, and she was someone who had actually written a book about her experience as a United Methodist minister and her gender dysphoria and having to eventually being forced to leave the church. But she transitioned. She came to peace. Her made her peace with God, and she was a minister at that point. But she told me, one area where you could do ministry, where you might be accepted is in hospital ministry, working as a chaplain. And I was natural at spiritual care. I love pastoral care to that I gave to people in my own parish, especially around issues of death and dying. And so I applied for a position at, well, first I took clinical pastoral education. You have to get a unit of that in first. And then I applied for residency. And when I applied for my residency, I looked like this. And I applied as Kailey and not as the person that I, had presumed to be behind the pulpit. And I was offered that job, and that was great. Um, oh, I really have to backtrack because um, I need to get into the near death because that's really what occurred during my first clinical pastoral education. I began my CPE, and there was this education that I was going to get that was going to allow me to be the hospital chaplain. That was the road I was taking, and so I was really excited about that. Um, but as soon as I began that program, I got sick. I got an infection. um, I was hospitalized. I had a surgery that put a stent in that drained that infection, but my body got sicker. The infection got into my blood, and I got sepsis. And that's when things I thought I was rolling, right? I thought, okay, I found something that I can do. I can get a job, and I that way I can make my exit from the church. I'm not won't be dependent upon them for my living or for my housing. I might even have a way of supporting my family if they moved along with me. They didn't move along with me, and I knew that, but this was bad, and I was excited about it, and I was dedicated to that no matter what. Um, but there I was in the hospital. Was it turning out the way that I expected? Um, and with my sepsis, um, I began to have breathing problems. And over a period of a couple of days, I went from being on oxygen to having a mask on, a BiPAP, and trying to force air to my lungs. But what was happening is my lungs started to fill with fluid. I had a high temperature, I think something like 106. My lungs were filling with fluid. And eventually I went into ARDS, or adult respiratory distress syndrome. My lungs, as they were filling with fluid, I knew this was going to be bad, and I asked for a priest, and a priest came. Actually, he came from my old church where I was ordained in Charlottesville, and I confessed being transgender as my sin, my gender dysphoria that I'd felt my entire life, that I had dressed when I was a kid, and even as I went into my adulthood, I would cross dress, and I did it behind my spouse's back. Um, and even though I had come out to her, there's so many times that I did things behind her back that weren't honest. Um, I was trying to cover it up. Um, and that was it. And I received absolution, and it was then that my lungs started filling with blood, and I eventually I drowned in my own blood. As my blood oxygen level dropped, as I mean, I'm assuming this is some of the kind of the medical things that were happening. The rest of my body was destatting, my heart rate dropping, my blood pressure dropping, all of that. I got tunnel vision, and everything on the sides went black. Went from the sides, it came in to like a straw, and I just could see just a little bit of light, and then eventually that light went out, and I was in darkness. But I still had my mind. Um, and I felt. I'd like to say I mean you think I'd be frightened, you know, um, but I just resigned myself to what was coming. And this is it. I'm 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 dying, and I knew that that confession that I had given not that long ago was something that if I had a chance to live my life again, that I would want to be a woman. You know, when you give your confession, at least in the church that I was in, it was an Anglican Catholic church. You know, you have to do it with a sincere heart that you're never going to come and um, do that sin again. You know, it's repent. You're repentant, and you change your life, right? But I knew if I had an opportunity to live, I would live as a woman at that point. I knew that, so I knew that I wasn't truthful in my penance, in my repentance. And so I was convinced I was going to go to hell. And I experienced people coming around me as it was getting dark, and I started they were I could feel myself being moved. And then I experienced being in tunnels, and I was being moved and pushed towards a light. And I moved faster and faster towards the light. And when I went into the light, I didn't know where I was going. My expectation was that when as soon as I hit that, I would be burning, because no one had met me to try to comfort me to say anything. It was just like an acceleration through that tunnel, and boom. And as soon as I went through that, I experienced myself leaving my body. I could look down and see what was going on as they were trying to intubate me, and you know, get the fluid out of my lungs so they could get me breathing again. And I went through the top of the hospital. I could see it descending, and then just like I was pulling away, like if a camera was on a rocket ship facing the Earth, as you see the Earth pull away. And as that occurred, I could hear like cheering above me, and I'm like, what is that? And I look up, and it's something akin to a stadium. I've tried to draw pictures of what I saw. It's, you know, it's kind of like a spiral. It's I don't know, but as far as it's definitely was like conical shaped. It just went up as far as I could see, and it was filled with of people. I think the souls of people who were departed. And why were they cheering? I Were they cheering for me? I don't know. I looked down on the earth, and what I perceived is that cheering for us to love one another, and they're welcoming the new souls that are coming in. Um, and then eventually, I even heard some. It was almost like a, a boo, and I was like, if you the you're, it's very much like there's a something in play on the earth, and some things will occur that would draw a negative reaction, like the other team scores a goal, and I was experiencing that as they did, and I wondered what that was, and I looked down on the earth, and what I saw was a bombing in Syria. It was Syrian war was hot right then, and it was a building it had women and children in it, and it collapsed on them as it was bombed, and it created a wailing in heaven for that loss and for that suffering, for that really the hate that had caused someone to order a bomb to be dropped to take the lives of innocent people, and that caused cry heaven to cry out. So I knew that, well, I know that we're watched, and our departed still can experience us, and they root for us to love one another. But anyway, that's just part of the understanding that I receive. Back to the experiences. I'm still going up. I'm going up. It looks like some other souls are coming up with me. They're being welcomed, just like I was as I'm coming up. There's some going back as well. I don't know exactly what was going on there. They're being reincarnated. I don't know, but that was going on. There's like this exchange that keeps occurring between the earth and whatever this other state was. Um, and then as I looked up, I saw a balcony. I'm scanning to see all those people are going up and up and up and up, as far as I could see. But then there's a was a balcony, and a woman walked out on that balcony. She was um, robed in just glistening material. I call it white, but I don't really have a color for it. It's like you see the light around this heart-shaped tree. She was just glowing, and her face was just glowing, and she had a crown on. And as she strode, I mean, she strode toward the edge of this balcony, the entire place hushes up, and there was a like a genuflect, like this a little bow of the head from the all of the people that were around her, and she was surrounded by like some kind of a court of other beings that came out with her, and she began to speak to me, and what I heard is a few different things. Very first was, don't be afraid. This isn't her like me seeing her lips move and me hearing it. This is a voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. It sounded as much like a rushing river as it did someone's voice. Um, and I received it as a voice of God. Don't be afraid. You're not going to die. And you're not going to hell. I made you. I know who you are. I made you like you are. And I don't damn you for being yourself. In fact, the people that taught you that, people that say and do things in my name that cause pain, that make people experience fear, that hurt other people, that even cause other people to hate and to do destructive things. The things people do and say in my name make me angry. And she said, "You're going to go back and you're going to teach people this." And it was 6 words that I was given: "The currency of eternity is love." And as I heard that, I understood it. Like, what do we value here? What is a currency? It's just a means of exchange. It's something that we give value because it's like a public contract that it has value. You have $100 bill, and the only reason it has value is because we agree that with each other that it has value, so we can exchange it for whatever costs $100. Well, to God, I understand that there's nothing that we have that has value, right? Other than love. And as God values our love for one another. And I understood from God that God needs nothing from us. God doesn't need us to worship in one particular kind of way. That really the best and highest thing that we can do is to love one another. you know we people aspire for power and position and money and monuments, but all of those things go away. Fame will go away. There will be a time when the most famous people are forgotten. There will be a time when the greatest monuments, like the pyramids, are swallowed up or chipped away by the sands of the Sahara, and even a time when our sun expands and it swallows the earth, and whatever is created here on earth is returned to stardust as it's burned. That's the fate of our world as best we understand it, and the evidence of our experience is that everything returns to the earth. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. That is our destiny. Even our fame, even our monuments, even our riches, it all goes away. The thing that doesn't go away is our love. The love goes with us to the other side. My experience from the people that are on the other side is they've experienced that love, and they love us, and they want us to love one another. And so that's what I was told to come back and teach, is that when, like Tia, when I love you, I can say that, and it doesn't really mean anything. It can be just words, but love is an action, love is a decision, love is something that we do that might even call for our sacrifice for another person. It's more than just how I feel. It's not just a warm fuzzy or a hug. It can be a hug when someone is down, but it's it's a decision we make that causes us to take action on it. And that's what love is. And the love that we have here is going to stay with us forever. And so I was told to come back here and to love the unloved, to love people who are often persecuted by the religious tradition that I came from and similar traditions, where people have been told forever that they are going to burn in hell. They're not going to burn in hell. They are loved. And I tell them, I love you. I love you because God loves me first. I've learned to love myself, and I love you. And that's all we need, is for us to love one another. And that's just what a great lesson. Today there's so much just hate and destruction and fear. And you know what? You don't have to fear dying. If you're gay or you're transgender and you've been taught your entire life that you're going to burn in hell, and that God doesn't love you, you experience your family not loving you. Well, guess what? I love you and God loves you. And when you face your eternity and even so-called judgment, it's going to be different than what you hear these days. when you love yourself and you've loved other people, God loves you, and God will embrace you and accept you forever. Even my idea of what God is has changed, and I don't really have time to get into that today. But the thing that is from my old tradition as I knew it, that I really can embrace, is that God is love, and God wants us, if it's even God is even the term to use, wants to embrace us in that love, and for us to love one another inside of that embrace. So when we die, we become one with God through our love for one another and our love for God. And that's really it. We don't need to fear. And so after my near death, um, that's when I decided I could live without fear. And that's when really I had to learn to walk again. I had to learn to do things like go to the bathroom. Um, I had the courage to leave my old church. I had the courage to be myself and just trust that my family would be okay. And they were. They were. All the things that I was so afraid of, that I'd be rejected, it, it was unfounded. It was self-generated. And my family didn't want me dead. They wanted me alive. And and I did get divorced. But man, my wife isn't lesbian. She doesn't want to be married to them. She loves men. I don't I don't blame that. She's living her best life now the best way she knows how to, and I'm doing the same. So even though I've made this radical kind of change, I had to leave my church. I'm living in a different gender. I'm proclaiming things that are quite different than what I was taught. This is my call. This is my calling now. And I don't have to be afraid. I get this one life. And so why be afraid of living my life? That's what I'm doing. And it's not always going to make me happy. I will have times when I get some pretty negative feedback, but I'm not worried about that person. My message from God isn't for that person. They think they already know, and so they're not open to that teaching. I'm here for people that are open to receive, that need to receive. When people need to receive it, those are the ones that will hear it. And good day or bad day, happy or sad, rich or poor, I have a life of purpose that I'd never had before. And so that's why I'm coming to talk to people like you, to be able to live out that purpose, to be able to live out that mission, to be able to share my experience, because in dying I learned to live. I didn't learn to live until I had experienced death. And now is I'm trying to live my best life, sometimes unsuccessfully. It's hard to be after you've been there, and I don't have to be afraid. It's hard to live in this world with all this pain and hate, and sometimes I can imagine what could be coming, and I could be afraid of that, but I'm not afraid of that, so I'll continue to proclaim.
Well,
Questions?
Kaylee, that was a lovely story, very heartwarming and touching. All of the experiences that you had to go through to finally accept yourself for who you really were, and having to die actually in
Yeah.
order to do it. How are you living your life today? Are you living as a woman full time now?
I started living. I applied for that job at the hospital as Kaylee, and when I was off. So that was after I started telling that story premature. That was after my near death that I did that. I mean, otherwise I would never have given myself permission to do that. I would have been horrified. Um, and yes, when I was offered that position, over the next 6 weeks, I changed my name, and I had already been on hormone, female estrogen, for several years. So my body had been changing. Um, and I took care of the legal part of it, and I socially transitioned. And so when I started that job, I was starting it as Chaplain Kailey. And I lived like that from the still 2018, so that was 6 years ago. And so that's who, and I've grown. Certainly, I have grown. I had to go through a period of adolescence, I guess, so to speak. That's kind of normal. And now I feel like I'm getting the place where I'm becoming a more mature person, and becoming more. At a certain point, it was about being a woman, right? And now it's just about me being myself, and those other things are incidental, really, to who I am. Sure, the pronouns that I use, that's how I dress, but that's not my core. It's part of who I am. It's not all of who I am. And so, really, I feel like I'm becoming a more complete person, and my self love, my self acceptance, along with my transition, has really allowed me to fully be myself. And the people that I was given the mission of coming and speaking and loving and sharing to, I wouldn't be received the same way that I am now. I mean, I became the person who can make that kind of message, that can, the claims that I'm making are, they're pretty drastic to some people. you know um and if I was doing it as a father so and so, no, I wouldn't have any entree. But now this is who I am. I am. So when I speak, it's like, I'm like you. I'm queer. I'm just like you. But this is what I've learned because of my near death experience. And so it gives me the ability to speak honestly, really, from experience. And that's something I never would have had I not transitioned. And so it's opened up a whole new world to me.
Do you think that God gave you this experience of dying so that you could come back and fully express who you truly are?
Yeah, you see, I had a couple. I always felt like I walked with God. Like I always had experience that God was in the room with me. I don't know, and when I would pray as a kid, I would just talk like it was a person in the room with me. Um, and there, I had some experiences where I felt like God had told me that it was okay for me to transition, and I felt called even to come, and the same mission that I was given in my near death. I had some experiences of feeling that before, but I never accepted it. I never accepted it. I thought I can't do that, and part of that is put me in a depression, really, thinking that I had the transition and how society would react to me. Kind of fueled that. But that's things. I'm trying to write a book, right? And those are some of the things that I want to put in that. It in and I think the near death was God going, hey, like shaking me, going, hey, look, I told you it was okay. You went to your pastor friend and you heard that. I had told you before, and some of your prayer experiences, about what your calling was. That's why I made you the way you are. And I kept rejecting it. And I kept walking away from it for years. And I was in my 40s, so it had been decades. And it took that experience for me to finally accept it. It had to be. I had to come face to face with my own mortality and acceptance that I wasn't going to burn in hell. I had to see it to believe it. And I did. That's so yeah. Was it planned all along? That's that's a predestination free will kind of debate. I don't know. I'm not getting into that. But it's the experience that I had to have to become the person that I am. I because of who I was before. It's because of who I was before, and that changed me. It changed me, and so it's like a baptism, and I came out, and it took that for me to really come out and walk forward as a different person.
Kaylee, if my viewers wanted to reach out to you if they have more questions, would that be okay?
That would be okay, sure. Yeah, I'm on Facebook. Um, Part of my calling has led to the business that I'm in. I'm working as a death doula. I'm not working in ministry anymore, but I help people with issues of death and dying, and I have that on Facebook, and they can find me on Facebook if they want to reach out to me. I'm also on Instagram, and I have a YouTube channel, my healing tree, is that's dying for lack of content. But yeah, that would be just fine.
Great.
And I'm available to speak too. I mean, if you have an organization that needs a speaker for something, that's in my bio. I think there's a bio that I sent to you, that if you want to put that in your comment section, whatever, please share that.
I will. I'll link or I will put the bio in the video description below
Okay.
for anyone who's interested. And do you have any last words of wisdom for my viewers?
Um, I'll just say memento mori. Know that you're going to die. Live today as your best day. Don't wait because you don't know whether you have tomorrow. If you've been putting something off, the business you've always wanted to start, a profession that you've always wanted to do, um, a fishing trip that you've always wanted to go on. If you don't go on it now, you may never have the chance. And so, if that's what makes your best life for you, then do it. If your best life is coming out, he's like, you feel like you're drawn to live as another gender. Well, I'm not telling you to transition. It's hard. It's really, really hard. Not everyone's going to accept you. It's really, really hard. But give yourself a chance to try and explore and learn. Let every day be a new day, a new learning experience. I'm not hard set on this. It doesn't have to be 100% of who I am. I can remake myself every morning. I love myself every day. Um, single best advice in loving yourself. Love your future self. If you can imagine yourself a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what would you do for that self? If you love that self, what kind of gift can you give yourself for tomorrow or a year from now or 5 years from now? My guess best gift that I could have given myself was to live this new life, embrace it, and live as Kailey. That was my gift to who I am today. My gift to who I am 10 years from now might be, well, it's a pretty day. I might want to go outside and go for a walk and have better heart health, better mental health, whatever that is. Give out of your love for yourself, gift something to your future self. And in doing that, then you are starting to do some of those things that you've been putting off doing. You start doing that and you start living your best life. How about that?
I like that. Thank you. That's a
Okay.
beautiful message.
All right. Great.
Kaylee,
Thank
thank
you. It
you.
was a pleasure.
The pleasure was mine. I appreciate
Okay.
your time.
You're welcome.
Oh, Thank you for being here. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here and supporting my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing if you enjoy near death experiences and other spiritually transformative stories. It helps the algorithm know that this information is useful and push it out to more people. And that's the goal, to get as many people to know that we are eternal spiritual beings and that we never die. Our bodies might die, but our essence will never die. And I want people to live with less fear. Let's all spread the word. Like, comment, subscribe, share, hit that little notification bell so you get all the notifications when my videos post. Thank you for all of your support. I'm sending love to you.